Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today for the Lytham Partners Spring 2022 Investor Conference. My name is Joe Dorame, Managing Partner of Lytham Partners. I would like to welcome Kraken Robotics, ticker symbols PNG on the TSX Venture and KRKNF on the OTC. Presenting from the company is Reid, Chief Operating Officer. Today, Greg will run through the slide presentation. Before we begin, Lytham Partners is one of the country's leading investor relations firms with more than 2 decades of experience, and we have built one of the industry's most effective platforms for connecting small cap companies and quality institutional investors. Hopefully today's event is another example of the value we can add. As a reminder, management will be available for one-on-one virtual meetings. If you'd like to sign up, please visit lythampartners.com/virtual and click the one-on-one meeting request button. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Greg Reid, COO of Kraken Robotics. Greg?
Appreciate the opportunity to tell the Kraken story. On the slide deck, starting on the front page, what you see here is a piece of equipment. It's an underwater drone. So Kraken is a Canadian-based company. We're a leader in ocean sensors and robotics. We provide both products and services to both the defense industry and the commercial market industry. So on the left, you can see a product called the KATFISH. And on the right, you can see the KATFISH being deployed by launch and recovery equipment off the back of one of our vessels. On slide 3, just to give you a highlight of the investment thesis on the company, we have numerous enabling technologies for the subsea world. We do have a very large market opportunity in an industry that's ripe for disruption. So we're talking about a $30 billion industry today when you consider both the equipment and the services that are used in this industry. And you're seeing, like in a lot of industries, you're starting to see an uptick in the adoption of robotics, as well as upgrade programs happening in a lot of the various defense-related programs. Kraken itself, we've got a history of innovation with some very disruptive technology solutions. We started out as a sensor company and over time have added various technologies as we've started to build our own robotics platform. And in the last couple of years, we've moved beyond just selling products, but also offering recurring services effectively for seafloor mapping and for inspection of critical underwater infrastructure. A little bit about the background of the environment that we play in. It's very challenging to put things deep in the ocean. There's no GPS, there's limited communication, and there's extreme pressure. So this is very challenging, which results in generally high barriers to entry. And our real value proposition to our customers is that we can provide them the highest quality data at the lowest cost. We're about 225 employees today across 3 continents, North America, South America, and Europe. And our board of directors and our management team have a long history in the industry, lots of depth, both technically and strategically. Really, the telling story on Kraken, though, is if you look at our customer base, for the last 10 years, we've gone from a startup doing missionary work to be able to sell new technology into a tough industry. And what we've seen the last few years is the increasing adoption by leading navies and defense companies around the world of our technology, and then as well the offshore energy and renewable energy industry. From a financial point of view and from a customer point of view, if you look at our revenues today, which we'll discuss a little bit in a few slides here, most of our business historically has been in the defense industry and on the product side. With a recent acquisition and some growth of some existing services that we have, we're starting to see a more balanced mix of defense and commercial activity, as well as product sales and recurring service opportunity. From a financial point of view, in some future slides, we'll talk about our pipeline of opportunities, which is strong and growing, both on the defense and the commercial side. And we'll also talk about robotics as a service, as a business model. So it's a high margin business for us, and for certain customers, it is more attractive to them than simply buying products. We'll also mention the acquisition that we did that accelerated our activity in the robotics as a service market, a company called Pangeo. And from a valuation point of view, we trade at what we think is a significant discount to our strategic value if you compare us to some other companies in the industry. Next slide, slide 4, just highlights we are a Canadian company. We listed on the TSX Venture Exchange. The ticker symbol is PNG, and we also are listed on the OTC market in the US. Roughly 100 million Canadian market cap. Management and insiders own roughly 20% of the company, and then we have a strategic investor who's also a customer of ours. They own roughly 11%. The company is called Ocean Infinity, based in the UK. And they're a high-profile company in the industry that is rolling out robotic ships, or a fleet of robotic ships to address the offshore market. This slide is intended to give you, to touch on a comment that I made earlier, but to give you some background into the environment that we play in. You can see a variety of end markets here in the ocean sector, everything from offshore wind farms to the fishing industry to the military to offshore oil and gas platforms. The one common in this underwater domain is that, as I said previously, limited communications. There's no GPS, pressure is intense, and there's lots of corrosion is obviously a major issue on equipment. So that means that it's a tough environment to play in, and as a result, the barriers to entry are high. Overall, sizing the market, a roughly $30 billion market. If you were to cut it into two silos, we describe those as the military market and then the commercial market. On the military side, where we predominantly play is in the mine countermeasures market. So what that means is think about underwater explosives, underwater mines that have been either left from the Second World War or been actively being put in the water as deterrents for ships and submarines. This happens it's happening in the Black Sea today with the Ukrainian-Russian war. It happens in the Middle East, and it happens in other geographies as well. So that's the military market where the bulk of our business has historically been. On the commercial side, there's a range of various end market activities, whether it's the building of offshore wind farms, the building of offshore oil and gas platforms. An emerging market is seafloor mineral extraction or exploration. And then there's a variety of cable and pipeline type surveys that are done on a regular basis. So there's a hodgepodge of various commercial market activities. One thing is for certain, that this whole industry is craving additional data, high quality data. There's a very small portion of the ocean that has actually been explored. And overall, the industry is ripe for disruption, something that Kraken is well positioned to take advantage of. Just calling out specifically on the commercial side, the offshore wind industry. The company that we purchased last year called Pangeo, a large part of their customer base is in the renewable offshore industry, so predominantly offshore wind. And the picture on the right shows a variety of offshore wind platforms with different substructures. And as you go farther away from shore and the water gets deeper, you'll see eventually you'll start to get into offshore wind turbines that are held in position by mooring chains. So where Kraken plays and with Pangeo is in a variety of both surveys and inspection of subsea infrastructure in the offshore wind space. Now, if you look at the offshore wind market, predominantly the European and the Asian markets are the largest ones today. But if you look at the US market, it's really just starting, going from almost nothing to 30 gigawatts over the next 10 years. And if you you look at some recent data points. In February, there was an auction held off of related to leasing for offshore wind in the New York area. And the winning bids were the highest ever for an offshore energy lease sale, $4.5 billion. Just in the last few days, Shell in Brazil has come out and proposing almost 17 gigawatts of offshore wind projects, making it Brazil's largest offshore wind developer. So whether, regardless of the geography, you're seeing all the major offshore wind developers accelerating their efforts, and you're also seeing a lot of the energy companies that were 95% plus exposed to the oil and gas markets are all making significant efforts in offshore wind. So in summary, offshore wind market is going to see a significant increase, and we're providing both technology and services to that market. Next slide is just giving you a highlight of sort of who our customer base is, and it is the who's who of the defense companies that are in the underwater domain, as well as the wind developers that are in the commercial market. So we've got companies like HII, Huntington Ingalls, I believe America's largest shipbuilder, build aircraft carriers for the Navy, are involved in the building of submarines. They bought a company called Hydroid, who's a customer of ours. Other companies like Boeing have underwater activities, Lockheed Martin have underwater activities, and then that's in the US market. As you get into the international market, we have several Israeli customers there, IAI, as well as Elbit, and then a variety of other companies, the Danish and Polish navies. Saab is a Swedish defense company. And then over on the right-hand side, you'll see a variety of wind developers, whether it's Ørsted out of Denmark, TenneT out of Germany, EDF out of France, Equinor, the Norwegians, Shell, a number of large players where we will provide the services to them for offshore wind-related activities. So looking at our business model, we started out as a sensor company 10 years ago. And our claim to fame is technology called synthetic aperture sonar, which we'll show you some pictures of in a few slides. As we've evolved over the years, we've started to develop our own underwater platforms, our KATFISH being our most important one for the company. It is the one that's used in the mine hunting applications, and it is effectively synthetic aperture sonar on a towed application. As we've evolved the company over time and grown, we've taken our technology, and for certain customers in the commercial market that do not want to buy a product, a multi-million-dollar product, and would rather just have the service provided to them, that's where we're starting to offer robotics as a service. So that's the evolution of our strategy. Just highlighting some recent notable wins over the last year or so for the company. On the left-hand side, you could see the yellow KATFISH on the back of our vessel in Canada. This is this type of solution that we are providing to navies around the world. So it would be our KATFISH, as well as the associated launch and recovery equipment, which is an overboarding system and a winch, as well as a bunch of topside computer equipment. Our Marquee win was the Danish Navy at the end of 2020, and the Danish and Polish Navy, as they're upgrading their not mine hunting equipment, we are delivering equipment to them at the end of last year. We made initial deliveries, and we'll continue and finish the product delivery side of those contracts this year, and then it will become service contracts for the coming years. In that particular case, what we were most proud of is that this is a 3-year-old product, and we played against the major defense primes like Northrop Grumman and Thales, the large French defense company, and won on those particular opportunities. And there's a number of other opportunities that I'll talk about in a few slides here. in that particular market. Also, recently we announced a $5 million subsea battery order. You can see a picture of our batteries there. They have some unique circumstances that make them, or unique properties that make them competitive in the market. And they typically go on other customers' underwater vehicles. And then on the right-hand side is an engineering picture of our acoustic core. This comes from Pangeo, and they recently won a $5 million contract in the Gulf of Mexico. In that particular case, you had a hurricane in 2004 toppled an oil platform. There was there was oil and gas leaking, and the equipment got buried in a subsea landslide. Below 60 meters of mud, and Pangeo's contract this year will be to go in and image that buried equipment in high resolution and be able to provide the customer information to help them properly plug the well and abandon the well. So I'll give a bit of background on the products, and then a bit of background on the services, and then get into the financial side. This just highlights an industry-leading product, synthetic aperture sonar, which I mentioned. The synthetic aperture sonar is used in other people's underwater vehicles, what are underwater drones called AUVs, or autonomous underwater vehicles. In the middle, you can see our KATFISH, which is effectively the SAS in a towed platform. Batteries, as well as our launch and recovery equipment, both the handling system, the overboarding system, as well as the winch. Those are the key product drivers for the company. From a revenue point of view, just to highlight, a typical sensor order is about $500,000. A typical KATFISH order is on the order of $2 to $3 to $4 million. A typical battery order is on the order of $1 million. So here's some pictures of our synthetic aperture sonar. So this is effectively underwater pictures created with sound. How we are different than our competitors, the traditional side scan sonar market, is with a competitor side scan solution, as you go further away from your underwater vehicle, your resolution is going to degrade with range. With our product, you can go out a certain swath up to 300 meters aside, and you're going to get the same resolution whether you're 20 meters away from the platform or whether you're 150 meters away from the platform. So what does that mean to the customer? To the customer, it means they can get a better area coverage rate in high resolution. So if they want to go out and map or explore a certain area, they're going to be able to do it in a quicker amount of time in very high definition. This slide really gives you a picture. You can see the traditional side scan, both in the gray and the orange. And that is, as the vehicle is moving underwater over the ground, that's the area that it's going to cover. Versus with the KATFISH, you can see the yellow swath going much, much further. So once again, you get a higher resolution at range, and you get a much better area coverage rate. This slide is an example of who we've sold our synthetic aperture sonar to, so our SAS, we call it. And it's a variety of customers with both big and small vehicles, everybody from Lockheed Martin and Teledyne on the right to the red AUV on the left is a company called Dive Technologies, which was recently bought by Anduril Industries, a multi-billion-dollar company in the US. In the middle is Hydroid Vehicles, the company that was bought by Huntington Ingalls, as well as Teledyne and Kongsberg, two of the other larger players in the industry. So we have a lot of experience integrating our SAS onto other customers' underwater vehicles, and it's a key part of the growth of our company. Now, if we start to talk about some different opportunities, in this picture, you're seeing what's called a man-portable SAS. So you'll see two Navy SEALs that are deploying a vehicle from Hydroid into the water. Traditionally, synthetic aperture sonar was too big and too power hungry to go on these smaller underwater vehicles. So it was a market that we could not address. What's happened in the last couple of years is we won a U.S. Navy contract to develop and test what we call the manned portable SAS. We've completed that, the initial 2 deliveries. We had been waiting for the Navy to award program of record to one of the AUV companies out there for these manned portable SAS vehicles going forward. And Huntington Ingalls, which owns Hydroid, just recently announced that they won that program of record. So that's a multi-year opportunity where new AUVs will be built. We've had a successful track record so far with the Navy on these small vehicles. And we've got a good relationship with Hydroid, and we expect that this will drive revenues for us into the future. To give you a sense, there's also an installed base of these types of vehicles out there, both in the US and in Europe, more than 500 vehicles, and selling a sonar at $200,000 or $300,000 a pop to be able to upgrade the installed base is a nice piece of business as well. KATFISH, talked about that a little bit. You'll see some examples. There's 3 of them then in our old facility in Newfoundland. On the right-hand side, you'll see a picture of the KATFISH on Israeli drone boat. And we point out that we did first deliveries of this vehicle in 2018. So we've delivered to the Israelis, the Germans, an American customer, as well as Poland and Denmark. So it's early days for us with this product line, but we are getting good traction so far, and we have lots of opportunity there. On the battery side, as I mentioned that earlier, roughly 20 million in revenues the last 3 years. What our real secret sauce is here is our pressure tolerant electronics. It allows us to put more batteries into the same underwater vehicle footprint versus competitor solutions. And we recently also won a $5 million order, as I mentioned, with Anduril Industries. So this is mainly for underwater vehicles. There is also a market for commercial subsea stationary power, which is early days, and we're exploring opportunities in that market. So that's products. On the services side, it would just highlight, you take Kraken's technology, such as the KATFISH, such as our laser scanner called C-Vision, combine it with Pangeo's technology offerings, and we have a multi-sensor, multi-platform survey and inspection capability. Pangeo's technology is similar to Kraken's in the sense that it's also synthetic aperture sonar, but they are able to image in 3D objects that are buried underneath the seabed. So Kraken's technology can't penetrate into the seabed, versus Pangeo's technology is used for buried pipelines, buried cables, buried unexploded ordnances, things like that. We acquired Pangeo last year, in the second half of last year. They're roughly 60 employees in Canada, as well as an operational base out of Aberdeen. And as I mentioned, their technology is critical for things like construction and maintenance of offshore wind farms and offshore oil and gas platforms. It really de-risks the building and operational operations and maintenance of those types of platforms. And this de-risking obviously delivers significant savings to the customers as well. To give you a sense, here in this chart, you can see predominantly their business has been European based. They have a number of major operators, oil and gas developers, offshore wind developers as their customers, as well as the companies, the large survey companies that provide services to these operators. Pangeo is oftentimes part of the overall contract, providing a piece of the overall survey job to these companies. Now, switching to the financials and the pipeline, overall on the product side, we have a significant pipeline of opportunities here. The real key driver is the KATFISH, as we mentioned, so similar to the Danish Navy and the Polish Navy business we won. And what's really driving that is the geopolitical tensions in various areas of the world, whether it's the Baltic, whether it's the Arctic, whether it is the Black Sea with the war right now with Russia and the Ukraine, the Middle East and the South China Sea are obviously other hotspots as well. And as various navies around the world are upgrading their mine hunting capabilities, we're well positioned as one of a handful of companies able to provide the solutions that they're looking for. The other part that I mentioned was selling SAS sensors onto other people's underwater vehicles, whether they're large or small vehicles. We are usually in the mix, and that market is seeing accelerating growth. And then finally, the pressure tolerant batteries, both for other people's underwater vehicles as well as SAS upgrades. So putting a synthetic aperture sonar sensor on a commercial market AUV. And you see in the example there, that Teledyne Sea Raptor vehicle on the right-hand side, that has both our batteries as well as our SAS on that. On the services side, so switching gears to the services side, roughly we expect around 12 million of services revenue this year, predominantly from Pangeo, which brings us existing customers, established processes, really great technology. But then we take some of our existing technology, like our KATFISH and our laser inspection equipment called C-Vision, and we put that under the Pangeo service delivery umbrella, and we expect that to really accelerate the growth of robotics as a service for us. From switching to financials, this gives you a bit of a profile of the last few years. For 2021, we'll report our year-end results next month in April. Our previous last public guidance on this was 28 to 30 million in revenues and EBITDA of adjusted EBITDA of $3 to $4.5 million, predominantly driven by KATFISH sales as well as battery sales and a partial year of Pangeo. So we expect really strong growth year over year when we report results next month, and expect that we will give guidance for 2022 and a commentary on the market. Given everything else I've said in the presentation about strong industry dynamics, the one thing we can say today is we expect continued solid growth this year and next year. And that is it in summary. Thank you for your time.
Greg, thank you very much for that overview. Let's expand a bit on a few topics since we have a couple minutes here.
Okay.
Can you provide more color on the value proposition of robotics as a service and the economics behind it?
Yep, sure. So robotics as a service is applicable to a part of the market. So for the most part, the defense market, those navies are generally going to go out and buy their own equipment. So they're more of a product sale opportunity. You will find certain countries where there is a robotics as a service opportunity for certain navies. So I really focus that more to the commercial market. And what the value proposition there to a customer is that they don't have to go out and spend $3 million to buy the equipment. They don't have to maintain the equipment. They don't need to operate the equipment. In the end, oftentimes what they want is just the data. So if we can provide it as a service, either as a direct contractor ourselves or a subcontractor to one of the other large survey companies, and the customer being the offshore wind developer or the oil and gas company is getting the high quality data, that's the business model that they like. So that's the value proposition. In terms of the economics of it, use a couple examples. So one with our product you can see behind me, the KATFISH. If you think about what our own internal bill of materials cost is, and if you apply an industry standard day rate, and we assume approximately, let's say, 60% utilization of that asset, one catfish a year has a payback of one catfish operating year has a payback of roughly a year. So from a revenue metric point of view, we would get roughly $6 million a year from operating one catfish. It's early days of us growing that business, so let's call it 20% EBITDA margins to start, and we expect over time, as we improve our track record, that we'll get our EBITDA margins up there north of 30. So in summary, the catfish there, you're talking less than a 1 year payback. One catfish should be able to generate $5+ million in revenues and $1+ million in EBITDA. And there's opportunities to deploy a number of catfish out there around the world for the commercial market.
That's very helpful. Given the challenging supply chain environment we're dealing with these days, how are you managing your business?
It is challenging for sure. There's no easy answers. So one of the benefits we had is when when we look at our pipeline and we see the contracts that we think are coming, and we forecast out several years, and we're purchasing in advance certain long lead time items as best as we can. With the Danish and Polish Navy contracts, we significantly loaded up on inventory a year ago, and you'll start to see our inventory levels come down a little bit this year as we've been delivering to those customers. But it is, if anything, we're trying to stock a bit more inventory, but it is a constant daily full court press effort from the procurement supply chain team as well as the engineering team. There's cases where we've had to, in some cases, redesign certain components to be able to, take advantage of the fact that we've, redesign certain components to be able to deliver things on time. And then there's other cases where customers are seeing it from all their suppliers, and as they have to deliver product to their end customer, they're telling their end customer the same thing. So there is supply chain challenges. There's no way around that, and you just tackle it head on as best as you can.
Very good. Next question is, what % of your revenue is recurring today? And if we're looking out 3 to 5 years, what would be your goal to have that portion to be reoccurring?
Yeah, today, and the recurring piece is really, it was minimal until we acquired Pangeo last year. So for the current year, we're probably talking about 30% to almost a third of our revenues will be what we would consider recurring in nature. On the services side, if we look out over the next 4 years, we think that will get up to around the 50% range. So we'll have 50% product base and then 50% services base.
Impressive. So last question. What are the key milestones investors should be looking for in 2022? And what are the biggest risks to achieving those goals?
Yeah, I would think for milestones, look for us for news out of us on that we're delivering on these the Danish Navy program. So we've delivered we've delivered some already. We have continued deliveries this year, so we'll talk about that as best as we can as those happen. That's a big part of our revenue last year and this year. The second thing would be conversion of the pipeline, and there's a number of smaller opportunities that make up the pipeline, but there's also a couple of big opportunities per year that are in our pipeline, and it's not currently in our revenue forecast, but there's a big multi-tens of millions of dollar opportunity which we're hopeful to hear about over the next 6 months. We think we're well positioned to win it, so look for that. It should be a big catalyst for our stock if that happens. And it's a mine hunting related program. A country is upgrading their equipment. And then probably the other two things would just be look for continued news flow on our services, recurring services piece, both contracts out of Pangeo, as well as us getting traction, doing what we said with taking Kraken's technology like the KATFISH or the laser scanner, which we call C-Vision, and seeing traction in that on the services market under the Pangeo umbrella. So those are kind of four things. I think from the risk point of view, two things, the biggest risks are supply chain, which anybody that manufactures equipment is probably saying the same thing. And then the other one would be program delays. In the defense market, these programs often take several years to come to fruition. And so I just mentioned one big one, which we are hopeful to win this year. If it gets delayed, that would be a negative, but we think it's mature enough in the process that it won't get delayed and there's budget allocated, et cetera. So those are probably the two biggest risk factors.
Very good. Greg, thank you very much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. Again, if you'd like to sign up for a one-on-one meeting with Kraken Robotics, please visit lythampartners.com/virtual. Click the one-on-one meeting request button. We wish you all a good day and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Joe.